to school, it was a little bit different. Antonieta was, no se hacía para atrás. In other words, if she thought she was right, she was right. She wouldn't back off. She
Mhm.
wouldn't. She wouldn't back off from anybody.
Now, who were your pals, Sammy, during the high school years?
My parents?
Your pals? Your
Oh, the first guy I met in school was Ruben Garcia. He sat in front of me.
Okay.
I never saw him before in my life because we didn't live there. So him and his sister were in the same class. David Gasca,
Yes.
the two Ramos boys were there with me, and
The Ramos boys, Mike or?
no, Louis and they were related to the Gascas. They were cousins. They lived on Third Street.
Mhm.
And a kid named Bobby Aguilera was a son of the Aguileras. He moved to San Bernardino, but they went to school there.
Mhm.
They were a year ahead of me.
Mhm.
So those are the first ones I met.
What about Ernie Garcia? Was he in your class?
He didn't go to grad school.
Uh-huh.
He went to
Wilson.
Garfield and Wilson.
No, but a high school, I'm talking about.
Oh
high
yeah,
school.
he went to high school.
Uh-huh.
He ran track. He was a cross country and a miler.
Uh-huh.
Very good.
And you said you were a baseballer.
Yeah, he wasn't. And
What
he
position did you play in
Was,
baseball?
I played outfield.
Uh-huh.
And
And your
then
batting average was?
could never do. Couldn't-
Say 500. Nobody will remember.
No, that's the truth. But
480.
Ernie was a very good track man. And Dottie and her sister, she had a sister named Marty that was in my grade. And Dottie was a little bit older. But they were an item already in school.
Uh-huh.
They were already, Ernie and this girl were already in school.
Uh-huh.
The Anglo didn't take too good to it. They
Well,
didn't
you know,
like it.
talking about that, we mentioned 1953, and you were in the Korean conflict. How did World War II and Korea affect the life in Colton?
They took everybody.
Uh-huh.
And they were waiting for him to get out of school. See, they lowered the draft age in 1943. They lowered the draft age from 21 to 18.
Mhm.
And they came out and got all the ones that were left.
Mhm.
They took him right off the bat, barely out of high school. They took his father. His father graduated from high school at 16. They got him until he turned 18. They came and got him.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
there was nobody left. They were taken, my dad was born in 1907, and there was a guy he grew up with. They took him because they couldn't prove how old he was.
Mhm.
He come from Mexico with no records, and you know, they look, oh, him.
Mhm.
He was already in the 30s. My uncle was in the 30s, no family. They took him.
Mhm.
He was born the same as my dad, so he was already 35, and they drafted him.
So as long as your body temperature was 98.6, vámonos.
Yeah, they
Vámonos,
took
let's do it.
everybody.
But I was referring more to when you came back, and was there a different attitude of the people that served in the service, World War II and Korea?
See,
that I paid my dues, therefore, I need to buy a house in North Colton or have
No,
a.
what happened was, when my tour of duty was over in Korea, some of the guys that had come back already told me, wrote me a letter that says, they're opening up 29 Palms. It's terrible. He said, they're gonna send you there. He said, if you could find a way to go someplace else, go there.
Mhm.
So I stayed another year in Japan, and I didn't come back till January of '54. So when I came home by myself. I didn't come home with a group.
Mhm.
And they flew me to San Francisco. I just came home. And some of the kids that came, went overseas together and came back together.
Mhm.
But I came home by myself.
Mhm.
I didn't wanna go to 29 Palms.
Yeah, but I was referring more of that people that served in the service feeling that they paid their dues, therefore you cannot treat me like a second-class citizen, and I deserve.
Yeah, my cousin Netchie, they sent him to Jacksonville, Florida, and he's on the train coming back. On the train, he went through Texas. He wanted to go in the club car. They wouldn't let him. He was in the Navy uniform,
Mhm.
Mexican. No way.
Mhm.
Until they got out of Texas
Mhm.
to New Mexico.
Mhm.
And it was that way. There was a place in Colton called the Hunter Sweet Shop. It was a combination drugstore, fountain and everything. Now, I don't know this for a fact. My mother told me. If you wanted service, you gotta go around the side and there was a window there. You go to the window and they will give you what you wanted, and You carried it out, you couldn't go in.
Mm.
It was understood, in other words, nobody tried to go in because they knew that you couldn't go in. I mean, it was unwritten,
Mhm.
but they had a window, they wouldn't deny you service, but you went on the side and they gave it to you.
And that's the way it was, and everybody accepted that.
They did accept
Everybody
it.
accepted
They
that,
accepted it.
Yeah.
With bitter no ice cream.
You know, I remember my dad, I mean, I was a little kid, and, but I remember him and my mom talking about the VA. Of course, I didn't know what it was, and about veterans benefits, and about going to school, and things that he could do. I just remember the conversations, I really had no idea what they were doing, but he did take advantage of that. He went back to the Valley College, and he got his AA degree. And I remember I remember vividly him talking about the VA loan in the very first house we moved to North Rancho, 1959. But I remember him using his VA to do that. So I know that he took advantage of those things, and he was really proud that of his service. You know, and he did take advantage of that. And I didn't get it the whole time he was doing it because I wasn't there. I was still a knucklehead kid, and but I know that those things you put on your collar, I know he had those. He had so much memorabilia from the military. You could tell that there was some pride. You know.
His father was one of the last classes at Randolph Field, I think that's what it was, for cadets for being trained for pilot training when they did away with it in 1943.
Mhm.
He was in the, he was smart. And they sent him, they transferred him to the Air Force, and he didn't finish because they canceled the classes, but if it had gone any longer, he'd have probably become a pilot.
Mm.
He was very smart, very affluent, and he had a way with people also. And he was another one that asserted himself. He didn't back down.
You know, he was a lot like my grandfather. My grandfather could, his imagination to see something and actually build it. My dad was exactly the same way. He could imagine things and go out in the backyard and make something out of absolutely nothing. You know, even a ping pong table that he built for us just to have something to do. He built that, and it ended up being the centerpiece for the entire neighborhood for all the kids during the summer. And we would actually have tournaments there. But the rule was when my dad came home from work, there was peace. Everybody had to go. My dad wanted to sit down and relax at the dinner table. That's another thing, if I could. Dinner, very special at the house, could not speak English. He would put everything in front of him. And you had to ask for the plate, for the tenedor, servilleta, everything you had to ask for. And then if you asked you a question, it was, you better not respond with a yes or no answer. It had to be conversation in Spanish. So that's, our dinner hour was spent like that. And I remember thinking I was going to outsmart my dad. I don't want to do this, my thinking. So I told my dad, I'm not hungry. I'm not going to eat. Oh, good. You can just sit there and talk with us anyway. In Spanish, he would tell me. So I did that one time. After that, I ate.
You know, you asked me about how things were in town. There was still a lot of prejudice, especially in jobs. There was this gentleman named Rueda, Beto Rueda.
Yes, I remember Beto.
You
yes.
Beto Rueda?
Yes, I remember Beto.
Well, Beto Rueda worked at cement company. Beto Rueda was one of the few guys that had a car, had a 38 Ford. His brother had the identical car. They didn't buy it new, but it was a nice car. Beto Rueda went to Valley College at night to study diesel mechanics. It took him a long time. He took the test and he passed it. They promoted him to diesel mechanic. The other workers at Galacho says, we ain't dressing with him and we ain't working with him. The foreman says, well, your union set the rules. He passed the test, finished the top of the class. He's gonna work for you. You guys can dress here, you can dress outside, or shower outside, but he's staying.
What year was that, Sammy?
That was right after the war,
Uh,
right after the war.
when they were making the transition.
They just, you know, they didn't want, you were a threat to their job, which you were, and they didn't want you there.
Yeah.
You know, you said, they said, we ain't dressing with him and we ain't working. Fine, go do what you wanna do. it was that way. Everybody was a laborer. Everybody,
It was hard to get
well,
promoted from labor.
they didn't assert themselves. You know, the Mexican had at that time that attitude, I'm here, don't make any waves, you know. We're gonna leave things that they are. But his father, Antonieta, were not that way. They were headstrong.
Mhm.
They pushed.
Sammy, you also mentioned about a person that had been worked for the city as a street sweeper.
Colunga.
Yeah, tell me about his situation.
Colunga, in fact, his
What was his
wagon,
first name?
Doroteo.
Doroteo Colunga.
In fact, they named the grandson Doroteo also.
Okay.
He was one of the first ones in Colton, and he got a job with the city, and he cleaned the streets, but he didn't have a truck. He had a wagon and a shovel, and a broom. He had to work for quite a few years, and then somebody decided, hey, he's not even a citizen. Why does he work for the city? He's gonna have to go. No, they got together and they let him keep his job. They did him a favor and let him keep working. But the wagon at the museum in Colton, his grandson's got the shovel,
Mm.
and you can see it is his shovel.
It was quite an issue. It had to go before the city
Yes,
council.
it did.
And the city council voted that he would keep his job.
Yes, he did.
What is the vote was 2-3,
Yeah,
3-2 or
very
something like
close.
that?
It was very
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. So that was one of the, I guess, victories that we
Yes, it was.
as Mexicans were able to, say that we got that one.
It was many, many years before we got a fireman, a Mexican fireman in Colton. In fact, there was a saying as one of the gabachos said, you might have a mayor. Oliva was a mayor at the time.
Uh-huh.
You may have a mayor, but you'll never have a fire captain.
Yeah.
That's the way it was.
Yeah. And that was, Pascual Oliva was the mayor.
Yes, he was.
Pascual Oliva, yeah. What year was that, Sam? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I think that was in the sixties.
In the 60s, 62 or
Dwayne
something?
was my age, that's Pascual's son,
Uh-huh.
and I remember hanging out at their house during high school, and Pascual was the mayor
Yeah.
in the sixties.
Yeah. So.
In fact, the older brother is still alive. Angel, he's 95 or 96, he's still alive.
Yeah, I tried to get him to interview with us,
Mm.
but his grandson told me that he is not healthy enough to
No,
do
if
so.
you talk to Rudy.
Yeah.
If you want, Rudy Oliva will talk to you.
Rudy was one of our first people that
Yeah,
we
Rudy,
interviewed.
I stopped to see him the other
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
and he told me that he says, here's a Angel, still the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know that when the father passed away, the father died before Stella was born.
Mm-hmm.
And Agustin quit school and supported the whole brood by himself. He became the boss of the house.
And it was a large family.
He was, and Agustin was the same age as the boys, but
Mhm.
he didn't get married till he got all the boys grown up,
Mhm.
all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Dijo mi tía, ya no hacen hombres como este hombre, pointed at Agustin, he said, ese es un hombre, which was true, you know, who's
Mhm.
gonna give up their, he was like 17, 18 years old, give up his whole life
Mm-hmm.
that he had ahead of him to take care of his family.
Now, Sammy, tell me about you. We've been talking about a little bit about history, Hamel family history, a little bit about. Well, before we get into that, you mentioned the first fireman in Colton. When did we get our first Mexican American fireman in Colton?
I forget his name, what was his name? He went to college and come out and took the test. I can't
Was it Eddie
Cortez.
Cortez?
Yeah, I think it
remember
was.
Eddie Cortez.
I think it was, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Cortez. But see, I was an only child for 9 years. My my brother didn't come along until 1942, so I basically spent most of my time with my grandmother. My father and mother were busy in the store, and I got to go a lot of places where they went. They went to Los Angeles sometimes on a holiday, and my dad always had a car. He bought a brand new pickup in 1938, and I went with him when he bought it, because I'm with him. And then 1941, I bought a new car. Nobody had a new car, but we had one. And I remember going to Los Angeles. We'd go to the Orpheum Theater
Mm-hmm.
to see a matinee, a stage show, and they showed a movie. In fact, at that movie, I saw a movie, the first Mexican movie I ever seen, called Maria Candelaria.
Mhm.
I saw a very, very famous Mexican movie. If you remember that? Maria Dolores del Rio was in that movie, and it was the first Mexican movie I had ever seen. I got to go to a lot of restaurants, which I'd get bored. My mother and father and uncle, they go eat. They spend all day at the restaurant. I go to the car and go to school. It was their
Now,
day out.
Well, what about after the war? Where did you work after the war?
I
You
went
to
to-
Korea.
I went to the service, and then I come back and I went to work for a phone company. That's what I did in the service. They sent me to teletype school when I went in the Marine Corps, and I got out, so I'm kind of interested in it. And I made an application at Kaiser, but at Kaiser, to get a job there, you had to go there. The first day, they give you a piece of paper. Come back tomorrow, come back next week. Then the next day, they give you, you fill in the paper. Come back next week. Then they give you a thing, a test. Then they come back again. So in other words, you can't get hired the same day. It takes about a week of going back and forth. So people get tired. I got tired of going back and forth. So I got a job with a phone company. I stayed with them. A lot of the guys that went there for Kaiser, Pio Carrion, he was smart. He was one smart Mexican. Made him a millwright foreman after about 4 years there.
Mhm.
They sent him to Chaffey College on a crash course on blueprint reading.
¿Cómo se llama?
Porfirio Carrion.
Okay.
His brother.
Oh, yes.
His brother
It's
played
Camilo.
Camilo. That was his brother.
Well, let me change the subject a little bit. We were talking about entertainment a few minutes ago, and prior to the interview, you mentioned the part of the entertainment was baseball.
That's it.
Tell us about the baseball.
The Colton cement plant had a team,
Okay.
and there was a guy that went to school with my mother, Gordon Maltzberger.
Yes.
Gordon Maltzberger was CIF player there in 1941, I believe. And he went to play with the White Sox, and he played with Hollywood. And his son went to school. I remember.
Well, his son was in my class.
Okay,
Yeah, Billy.
yeah. He
Yeah.
looked just like his father, glasses and the whole
Yeah.
thing. But the cement plant had a team. Santa Fe had a team.
Mhm.
And they had this black guy, big, tall, skinny black guy. His last name was Morris. They nicknamed him Santa Fe Morris.
Mhm.
And he pitched for years. I mean, he must have been 60 years old. He still played. And there was a lot of commercial teams. Redlands had a team. And on Sundays, that was it. Everybody go to the ball game.
Mhm.
It was cheap, didn't cost anything.
What about Colton? Did they have their team?
Colton had the Mercuries. They came in after the war.
Uh-huh.
They came after the war. Albert Martinez, which is Nick's brother, Willie Rueda, Ralph Martinez, remember Ralph Martinez?
Ralph and his
Ralph
brother.
And his brother,
Uh-huh.
and Teo Duarte,
Teo Duarte,
one of the Rosales,
Beto.
Gilberto, and Mercado, Mike Mercado.
Mike Mercado.
Juan
The
Mercado.
Abril brothers
Yeah.
played for
Pardon?
them. The Abril brothers.
Yeah, but they were
But this-
later on, and
Yeah, they
then
were later.
Tony Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Garcia, he played, he was a very good player.
And Tony lived almost across the street from your store.
Yeah, he lived up
And-
the street.
Yeah.
Chamano was his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Chamano, his real name was David.
Mm-hmm.
They era David, Cayo, Tala y Cherry, las muchachas. Y el padre era Ross Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
He was a
Mhm.
carpenter.
Yeah. So baseball was big in Colton.
It was.
Mhm.
It was a big thing.
What
And
about the
then
Purdue team? You mentioned Meatless.
Meatloaf had a good team. I mean, the Botellos was a big family. They all played. They played at the park. It's up in north of Mount Vernon. There's a park up there. That's where they played at.
Was it the corner of Mount Vernon and 7th Street? Where the
farther
Placita
up,
is now?
Farther up.
Yeah.
But they had a very good, then a prop room had a team, and then there was a softball team called the Generals. They had a team. It was a big thing. It was sponsored by local, and then there was a team in Blooming called the Cedar Lumber Company,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a very good team that,
Mhm.
they all played each other,
Mm-hmm.
but it was
It was a Sunday entertainment. eh?
Sunday entertainment.
Family
Sunday
entertainment.
Yeah. And you mentioned you worked for the telephone company, and you retired from the telephone company?
I started with General, then I went to Victorville, it became Interstate, and then that company changed to Contel, then it changed to Verizon, and I wound up with General again.
Mm.
All the big companies eat the little ones, that's the way it
Yeah.
is now,
Yeah.
that's the way business is now.
Yeah,
And pretty soon there won't be no telephone company because of the cell phone.
yeah.
That's what I tell people, if you see a telephone, better take a picture of it because it's gonna be gone.
Well, people don't remember the rotary forms that we used to
That's what I
have.
told, that's what I told the kids the other day. You see that thing, you put your finger in the hole and you dial. Really?
Well, what about, did you have family?
I had my first wife, in fact, one of them looked just like my mother in the picture that she has.
Oh.
She's a fitting image of my mother.
Uh-huh.
And they just, I don't know what it is. Because like I told you, my family is split in two halves. They are Ramirez, which was the first group,
Uh-huh.
and the last three are Gonzalez.
Uh-huh.
And we're very different.
Uh-huh.
His side, his father,
Okay.
that is my girl. That's Pete. He hasn't changed, lo mismo. And that's Amelia.
Frank, we're gonna have to scan these, eh? And then put him as part of the into the
See-
interview.
See, to tell you how things were in those days. My grandmother had kids from 1897 to 1920. It's a long time.
20-some years?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, when Pete was born, my grandmother was already in her 40s. She couldn't breastfeed Pete.
Mm.
Pete was infant. His older sister breastfed Nick, Baker, and him,
Mm.
because that's the way things were done.
Mhm.
That's the way things were done. And my grandmother, she was already in her 40s.
So, Sammy, what are you doing now?
Nothing. I lost my wife almost 3 years ago, Parkinson's.
Uh-huh.
I live by myself.
Where do you live?
I live in Just Ranch there in Victorville.
Ah,
It's
okay.
a gated community. We had a nice house before. It got too big. We couldn't take care of it. So all I do is pay the rent, pay the lease, and they do everything. They mow the lawn. I don't do anything. I just get up, eat. It's-
Well, I'm delighted that you were able to do that because
In fact-
we lucked out with you today.
In fact, you know what I got? When I was taking care of my mother, my dad had just bought a Honda, 93 Honda, guess where it's at? I got it, 93 at 21 years old. I'm still driving it.
You know, your mom was a very good friend of my mom's.
Oh,
And you said you took care of your mom. How long did you take care of your mom?
all told, she was on dialysis for about 5 years, last 5 years of her life. And I used to live in Victorville, and I would come down Monday morning, and I would take her to a session on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then on Friday night, Estelita, my cousin, would come and spend the weekend with my mother and look after her. And then I would come back the following Monday and stay the week. So that's what I did.
Yeah. And you know, Fernando, you mentioned very Sundays after church, and your mom was very involved with the
Yeah,
church.
she was. That's a thing that used to make me mad. I'd come back on Monday and I'd go in the garage to get the car, the mirror was crooked and the seat was all the way forward.